Okay, and welcome to episode number 32 of Shockwaves. I'm one of your hosts, Rob Galluzzo. I'm sitting here with Mr. Ryan Turek.
Hello.
What's up, man? You got the
Happy
Freddy
holidays.
sweater? You got the holiday sweater?
I got the Cthulhu shirt on. I got
Whoa.
the Freddy sweater.
All right.
I'm doing it right.
You're ready.
I'm
ready for Christmas.
What I'm missing is eggnog and rum.
Ah, we forgot the eggnog and rum. Sitting here also is Elric Kane. What's up?
I'm pretty excited, Rob.
Oh, God, I should have skipped away. Rebekah McKendry's
Elric,
here.
shut the fuck up.
I'm so excited. Wait a minute. That's too soon.
We'll let you get excited in a minute. But hi, Rebekah. Welcome.
Hi, Rob. How you doing?
I'm great. Okay, and Elric Kane is here, too.
Yeah, Elric's here.
All right. And did I mention I'm excited about
Why are you
today's
excited?
episode?
Very excited.
Do you want to do the intro?
Well, no, I don't. I like, because you deserve this intro because you've been working on this for a long time. But I will say we've done, in our old show, we did 3 years. And we always did Christmas episodes. And I feel like the whole point of our 140 episodes was leading to today.
Yeah,
No
it
pressure.
really was.
I feel like the only reason we existed as a podcast was for today.
So you're saying rather than talk
No
about,
pressure, guys.
You're talking about rather than talking about Christmas horror.
Right.
Exactly.
We thought we'd do something a little different.
Well, there are like
Exactly.
two quintessential Christmas horrors that come up in every list every single time you even remotely discuss Christmas horrors. And we kind of have them both in the room today.
All right. I can't contain it anymore. Okay, so believe it or not, we have a lot of people this time of year are celebrating with Silent Night, Deadly Night. A lot of people are celebrating Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, one of my personal favorites. We have the lead killers from both movies together. Robert Brian Wilson from Silent Night, Deadly Night 1 is Billy. Hi.
Hello, folks.
Well, I can't, and Eric Freeman from Ricky from Silent Night, Deadly Night 2.
Hello, thank you for having us.
I can't believe it.
Guys, this
Can you
is
believe
insane.
it?
This is
amazing.
kind of epic,
Well,
guys.
how many years ago did we have the director of Silent Night 2? Was it
I think it was
2
about
years
2
ago?
years ago. It was Lee Harry came on
Harry,
the
yeah.
show. And the thing is, like, look, I was explaining to Robert when he got here is that for whatever reason, horror fans are obsessed with celebrating every holiday by watching every holiday themed horror movie, in there. So we watch these movies every year. A lot of people do. And I don't know what it is about it. Can we?
Well, we do, but we revisit the ones that are great.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
ones that are good and the ones that leave a lasting memory. And thankfully, the films that you guys participated in have that lasting effect. It's like there are a handful of really kind of weird, obscure Christmas horror movies.
A lot.
But, I was thinking about it on the drive down. It was like, because you had said in an email chain, and we were kind of rapping back and forth. You were like, "Well, there's only 5," and I'm like, "You know what? You're pretty much right, dude.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's 5
like
great
there are
Christmas horror movies.
But that doesn't
That you
stop
wanna-
you from watching the bad ones anyway.
But they disappear.
They disappear.
They do.
disappear.
But both of these films break the ultimate taboo with Santa, right?
Yes, the killer
by
Santa,
inverting
yeah.
what Santa represents, and I think that's why they have that longevity to be remembered.
Right, and I'm sure, like, for a long time, neither of you realized how much of an impact these films had. So I do want to talk about them, but let's go backwards a little because it's interesting how you both even met each other,
Right.
which I believe was our mutual friend David Dakota.
Who's been on our old show.
Been on our old show, directed so many great full moon movies, for Charlie Band back in the day. So what was how did this happen?
Let's see. On September 11th, we were both asked, Eric and I, to join Dave and shoot a scene in a film that he's shooting for Hybrid, which was Husband for Christmas. And
Which is a Lifetime movie, right?
I think no. Where did it go?
It was Ion.
Okay.
Ion. Yeah, it went to Ion. Thank you. But anyway, so I heard through David that I was going to meet Eric, and this is the first time that Eric and I had met. So I looked forward to it, and the moment that I met him, we started chatting about the film and the history of it and how it's all come about, and it was just really great to hear it from his perspective. And we've talked now on a couple of occasions, and he's got a film that he's working on as well. But anyway, it was just real nice to meet him and to share some time after 30 years, and speak to somebody that was kind of in the same boat as I was, and get his perspective on it, which was that the films are very surprising to us and to what what's happened with them, and it's been just fantastic. It's really great, and I cherish the horror fans. I really do. I've been to a couple conventions, and they're just fantastic. I really love them.
Right. I mean, you guys are cinematic brothers, technically.
Yeah.
So
my experience in this is somewhat different in the sense that we both showed up for this shoot. It was supposed to be a small shoot, right? Robert told we be in and out in an hour, and that's David's forte. Is
he shoots movies in 3 days. So
he even said, you're going to be here 45 minutes, an hour tops. You're gone. And Robert and I met. I didn't know Robert from the world. I don't know if he was. I was under the impression he was not even told that he was going to meet me. That Dave was kind of keeping it quiet, and so we became fast friends, entirely separate from the movies. That we did. And so we're just talking about anything other than film. And a PA or I believe it was the AD to Dakota walks up with his headset on, pulls it down, and says, "Hey, are you guys the leads of the Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise?" And we looked at each other, and I guess we are.
It's like, wait, did you do one of those? I did one of those. That's amazing.
And so then we had we were there 5-6 hours,
right.
So we had the world of time to talk about the films, and I really was more interested in what he had done and how he got his film and how that came to be, and we had similar backgrounds, both being athletes and coming into the world of, the acting world that way. And so it was really cool.
Right.
And so we did our scene, and we parted ways, and we've talked about some project I'm working on, and here we are.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, no, it's amazing.
Were you guys in and out in 45 minutes or less?
6 hours later.
Hung around for a couple
6
hours. Yeah. Well, I think I want to know about when you guys kind of heard about the cult following of your respective films, because with Robert, the film got pulled in under 2 weeks. When Silent Night, Deadly Night came out, it was a big deal, caused a lot of controversy, and it was one of your first gigs, so
right.
I'm sure it was a big deal for you at the time, and then it got attacked by parents groups, and a lot of people were very upset about it. Right. So I mean, how did you get the gig initially? What was that like?
Yeah. Well, I was just new to the industry, and I was given an address to go show up there. You've got a casting call for a film, and I did what I had done on many other occasions and went and read for the part. And I had no idea really what I was getting into. Although, you can read the material and kind of get an idea. But, I went and read for the part, and one thing led to another. And next thing I know, I was, the lead in this film. And I'll tell you the truth, when it did come out, I was, so new to the whole experience that I was in a bit of shock myself, probably along with a lot of the parents, truthfully. And so, I probably had a rough moment with it. And the fact that when they did pull it, from my perspective, I was kind of like, this is okay, because this film is a little bit on the edge, which, Elric and I were speaking earlier. And we kind of, now that I'm, a little bit more mature, much more, looking back, that's where it had to be. I'm really glad that we did what we did now. At that moment, I had no idea what I was getting into. I was just another actor looking for a job, and I got cast in the film out there, and next thing you know, I'm in Salt Lake City shooting it. And it was really, it's kind of a blur looking back through. It was it was a tough time, because I didn't know what I was getting into.
Right. And did it affect, like, after it came out, did it affect your trying to get more work? Because now you're the lead of this film that's got so much controversy around it.
Right. Nothing ever came to the forefront. Nothing ever was ever said like, hey, you're not here because of this or that, because of the film. So no, not that I can say. I don't think anything. The work that I did not get was on my behalf, not because of the film I did.
When they pulled it, did you have anybody reach out to you and say, "Don't talk to any press, don't talk to anybody, just let us handle this"? Was there any kind of PR that was surrounding you or surrounding the film that, like, kind of downplayed everything?
No, not one bit. Not one bit. As a matter of fact, I think I did an article for People magazine.
No, no kidding.
And nobody said, "Hey, don't do that."
What was the nature of the article?
The nature of the article was, "Hey, how do you feel about doing a film like that?" And now that it's been pulled and whatnot, and I can't, I'd only be paraphrasing, of course, but again, it was basically what I've just said, that I was kind of like in shock with the film as well. Thank goodness for the evolution of art and whatnot, because I'm very pleased and to meet the horror fans now and to realize how they see the film. It's very different than my first take. Yeah.
Because parent groups will try to make it seem like only perverts and sickos could watch this.
Precisely.
But what you realize is everyone has a part of that inside them. That's not a perversion or sicko, but we have a side of us that wants to watch something different or something that pushes a boundary that's totally natural.
Right.
Absolutely.
In our lives. And I think, it's hard when you represent that because you're an actor. That's the unfortunate position to be an actor representing. They might see you as the ideals of the movie or the values, and that's tough.
Right. Yeah, we were saying before off mic that so the controversy, maybe parents didn't want people to see it, but for 13-year-old Rob and Elric, we had to see this thing. It's like, what? All right.
And we were talking about Ebert and Roper. Ebert and Roper, really went to town on it, like they did a lot of movies at that time. And that
Siskel
and Ebert, and it really only makes you, want to see it more. What I'm surprised though is that it was actually pulled, because often a exhibitor like that would actually benefit from that controversy. So it's interesting I have to look deeper into why. But
usually they would play it up if anything.
Exactly.
Right.
But to Eric, I want to ask you about yours, because yours is slightly different. I've never heard anything like this. Basically, because we had Lee Harry on, who was the editor / director of the second one, right. And from his perspective, so it was a few years later, and I guess the people that own the movie hired him to re-edit the first one and re-release it as Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. And he got in there and started cutting it together and basically convinced them. He's like, "Look, I can't re-edit this. You should let me shoot more movie, and we could properly make it a sequel, So it started out as kind of like trying to repurpose the first one, and then ended up being an actual film on its own. So how did you get that role, and were you aware going in that this was a sequel to Silent Night, Deadly Night, the controversial movie?
I got it. I came in on an audition there was a rag sheet in the day called Dramalog, kind of a cheap little circular you could buy for $1.50, and to tell you about what non-union gigs might be out there, or union, and who's casting and who might be holding an audition. And we all knew about it back then. And so I went to the audition for an unknown horror film as a security cop or something that was ancillary to. And I was young and brazen, and as I was leaving, they videotaped everything, and so. That would be nice to see that. But the point is I was leaving, and I said, "Well, who's got the lead?" And Joe Earl, who was the co-writer with Lee Harry, instantly jumped on and said, "Well, we've got that locked up." And then Lee was staring at me a little too long and looking, and he said, "Well, we think we've got that taken care of, but thank you for coming." And that was it. And I walked out. 2 days later, I get a call from Lee, and he says, "Well, we'd like you to come in and read for a part." And so I thought, okay, the cop thing, security guard, something. And so I came in, and then we did videotape this, by the way. And but to get back to your second part of your question is I did not know about the film. I had never seen the film. When I came back again, Joe Earl had again said, "No, the same thing. We've got this locked up. We've got this guy. He was doing some crazy things in his audition." They wanted to videotape me on for this lead, so they gave me some sides, and I read it, and they taped it, and again 3 times in that second visit. A combination of 3 times that Joe said, "We've got this locked up." They had another actor entirely. Yeah. But Lee saw something in me via the resemblance to the younger Ricky in first one, I believe. And so I read, I left, and I got called back again. And then Lee said, "Eric, we'd like you for the lead. Could you come in?" And then I came in, and what at that point Lee and Joe acted out all the scenes they wrote, and I was led to believe that it was kind of a comedic angle to it because they were laughing their heads off playing out these scenes.
You just answered the question everyone's been wondering forever. Is it meant to be funny or
Is it
not?
supposed to be a comedy?
There you go.
Right, they were in stitches and holding their stomachs, and they might not remember that. And the irony is, I came back on that when they were about to sign me, much like they did to Robert, where you're signing contracts and it's real heady stuff for young guys. And but the point is they videotaped me and they pulled me aside and said, "Well, Eric, we got this other guy, and he was doing some real crazy stuff on his audition, and you were kind of subdued." Mm-hmm. And you know how my film ended up. I mean, I was chewing all the scenery, and it was diametrically opposed to what Robert did. But the point is, early on, I mean, I was in Charles Conrad and serious acting class, and I knew, subtle is the way to go. But these guys were pushing this, this guy's crazy.
Yeah. Right. And I thought I read maybe an interview you'd done a year or two ago saying that because of the speed and budget of this, you guys only did like 2 or 3 takes of everything, maybe. Is that true?
This is the David Dakota type of shooting where you get one.
We know exactly what that means.
We know what that means.
one crack at it.
Yeah.
The direction was, how to, it was all technical. Enter here, stop here, the usual marks and lines, and we'll deliver this. But there was no videotape playback on the set. There was no dailies. There was no nothing to watch what we were doing. It was shoot and go, and Lee was doing everything he could to try to get $100,000 and 1 week to get all this done.
Yeah,
and he was really a director that cared about cuts and shots and dolly shots and rack focus here and there. He played a lot with director skills, and so there wasn't a lot of time. I really didn't talk to him on the scene or how he wants it played or this or that. But Joe was there, going, "Eric, you got to be crazy, and this is where he's nuts. This is where he's off the chain," and so it led to where it led.
Right.
And in the day, I looked at it later. Months later, there was no screening, or they just kind of cut you loose, and that was it. But Robert and I have a similar experience on this. Is you're left to find it on your own, and where is it? Where's it playing? And I didn't think it was my best work in the day because I had done work prior and then a number of things after, and but it's got a life of its own now.
Yeah,
it's out of body stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you after you got the role, but before you shot, did you watch the first one? Did he show you the parts that were pertinent to your character?
No, and I wanted to. There was no access to it. I mean, they shut that thing down. You couldn't get it for the world. Right.
Yeah,
you could search high and low, which I did. I even went to in Manhattan Beach Video. Tarantino worked there at the time, I believe, or just left. And I went there because I knew it. I used to live in Manhattan, and I tried to find it, and I didn't inquire with Joe and Lee. I don't know if they really wanted me to see it.
Right.
To skew my mindset on that.
Interesting.
So, no, I didn't see it.
When you ultimately did, you did ultimately catch up to it, though, at one point. You saw the film.
original? Have you seen the original yet?
You've seen the original.
Yes.
Leading to the question of your first time seeing the film, where were you? What was your thoughts on it?
Well, I thought it was fantastic, and it wasn't that many years ago I saw it. I thought Robert did, understated, great job, great. I mean, just the way you should do it, he did it, and so I was really pleased. I said, before I knew him, obviously, a few years back, I'd seen the whole thing. I bought it in a double disc with my movie and said, I'll look at this. Years later, just a few years ago. So, but I was impressed with it, and I said, well, geez, boy, did I go in a different direction, didn't I?
But here's the thing. I love both movies, but I'm going to tell you, Eric, right now that I love the second one, and it's because of the performance that's there. It's a capsule of that time, and I love it for sheer entertainment. I love it. It's a very entertaining movie. It's the one I go to. I usually go to both. And for a long time, I also said and I'm being candid with you, Robert, I've only recently had found more of an appreciation for the first one, because as a kid, when I finally did see it, I thought it was a little too raw. Like there was some nasty stuff in it.
I remember thinking it was dark. Like
Really
as a
dark.
kid, it wasn't. And this is, I mean,
It messed
when
us
I was
up
a kid,
as it intended to.
it wasn't fun for me to watch at Christmas time. Like there were fun Christmas horrors, like Gremlins. But this one, it was just straight darkness.
Well, weirdly enough, I think it's the grandpa scene is one of the
Oh my
scariest,
God! Yeah.
scariest
That's
things in
it.
any movie ever. Like it
Yes.
talk about kinder trauma when you're a kid. Like this is an old grandpa pulling you aside, pretending to be
Grandpa?
comatose, and then telling you the scariest thing about Santa. You better run, boy. You better run for your life. And you're like, what just happened?
And then seeing Grandpa pop back up in Back to the Future, you're like,
Yeah,
oh
yeah,
my
yeah,
God.
Yeah, he pops up in a few other films.
Mind blown.
Yeah.
But my point was that because the first one was so raw to me, I like the second one because it actually edits down the first one and makes it a little bit less raw, because there's a pretty brutal rape at the beginning of the first one, and there's some dark stuff. Whereas in part two, it's the beats of the first one condensed for the first half, and then you get this new story. So I always kind of preferred the second one because of that, because it took away some of the roughness of the original. But I mean, look, for a long time, I mean, horror conventions have been going on for at least 15, 20 years. At least they're bigger now than ever. And there's something that we always want to meet these people from these movies. You've recently done a few and made some appearance. And Eric, I'm sure you've heard a lot of people. I mean, there was a website called Finding Freeman out there for a while, which I think is amazing. And I just want to know what you think of that. The idea that there's nothing to it. You just left the business. You know what I mean? There's no grand story.
And I'm
behind
also
it.
on top of that, I'm also really curious when you heard that there was any interest, like through YouTube or whatever it was, when there was a renewed interest in both films.
Yeah.
Where were you when that? Who told you that?
Yeah, and had you heard, like, did you ever Google yourself and see all these, like, dedications to you? Yeah.
Good questions, all. But I found out about it, and recently, if there ever were a case of Rip Van Winkle syndrome, it was me. I was asleep, and 3 years ago, my brother unexpectedly died of a heart attack, and I went back for a memorial in the dead of winter, Minnesota, cold, and he had a car of mine, and I was storing, and so I went back in the spring, and I was getting it up and running, bringing it back here. A friend of mine, Med James. And John James is part of this blogging crew of Finding Freeman, but Med is a lifelong friend. And he said, Eric, I told you about this 6 months ago when you were back, and they're looking for you. And there's this, and it one ear out the other. I was somewhere else with my brother and all that, so didn't pay attention. And then when I was fixing my car, short story, he tells me again, and he was insistent that I look at this. And he said, John's right down in the basement. He's blogging somebody about this, Finding Freeman. I said, what? And he said, you made a movie in the 80s. And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, horror film. I said, oh, okay. And then it all clicked, like, oh, they want me for that? And I didn't understand the momentum and what it was. That world I did not know, I found out that day. And the blogging, the good things were said, and they always are. And Robert knows this. And then there's awful things being said. And there was one blogger in particular, and I don't mind cutting me to ribbons. I deserve it in many ways, but you should have been on the set. People talking like they were there. And I was the dog you could kick because I wasn't around to defend myself. Nobody knew where I was. They didn't talk to me. They didn't get my take. They only got Lee and Joe and all that. So for me to read things like they were there and they were, they knew everything about me and how it went, and they knew nothing. And so one blogger in particular, I went in my head, I will talk to him when I get back to L.A. And so when I drove my car back, I contacted one of these guys and straightened him out. And because I said, hey, that's not how it was. That's not how it was. And they do that. And Robert and I have talked, and that's exactly what the people act like they were right there, and indeed they were not.
Right.
And
everyone's got a voice now on the internet. That's good or bad, either way.
So you're talking about mostly blogs, but because I became aware of it. I'd seen part one, growing up, but part two I didn't really know about until like particular clips of it on YouTube. And it seems like YouTube just showing you like glimpses in certain scenes. And it was obviously Garbage Day. I think that was the first thing I would have seen. Did somebody show you that? Going, no, it's this particular thing that they're watching, and people are all sharing this stuff, like the social media side of it. When did that become clear to you?
Well, I did see in that short time I spoke about, early on when I first found out it was Garbage Day, 6 million hits, right? I looked at that
I
one.
mean, that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, and I said, well, the kid's off the chain there. And but many people love it, and I can't hide from it. And
have you seen the video that somebody did, like, if Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 was a Nintendo video game? Like an entire animated 8-bit sequence. Yeah. To me, it's like, it's mind-boggling that somebody would do that. But I mean, it's amazing. Literally amazing.
Your face is on thousands of T-shirts everywhere. Like, I feel like at some point, if you hadn't found out about the website, you would have just been like walking down a street in Burbank and seen your face on a T-shirt.
I may own one of those shirts.
Well, I was going to say, just in general, I mean, like, what's your take on the fandom now? I mean, has it completely blindsided you? I mean, what is...
I feel like Robert does in the sense I am overwhelmed and so many emotions come to my head when someone comes, talks to me or writes me and says, "Oh my God, I had been selling some posters, some original posters that I had from the day," and people are just they're the kindest people in the world. They love it. They love that film. They love the original. They and many didn't. They felt it was sacrilege to adulterate such a fine original film as SND and change. It's a horror film, and all of a sudden, what is this that they tacked on? So I got a lot of that too. Like, what did you? How dare you? And I get that. I mean, it's a horror film, and then all of a sudden it was a comedy horror film. So, but as far as the fans, I am, I'm embarrassed and overwhelmed at the same time because it's like I stick my toe in the sand kind of thing, like, oh well, thank you, but I really am just I can't even accept the fact that that many people love these films.
Yeah. And you had come out to a screening, what was it, 2 years ago, right? There was a screening at the New Bev. I know Lee showed up, and I think you came as well at the New Bev.
Yeah. I was just called. Lee knew. I contacted Lee prior week or just say, hey, I'm feeling nostalgic. I wanted to connect after 25 years, and he said, hey, I've got something I'm going to on New Beverly Cinema, and would you like to come? And I said, well, I don't think they want to, see me. And I still hadn't, and he said, no, Eric, you got to show. And
I begged Lee. I was like, if you're in touch with him, bring him. And here's the thing, that screening was good, but there was one the prior year to a sold out audience it was like being, I'm not even exaggerating, it was like being at a rock concert. People reacted so strongly to it. And like I said, the New Beverly is the type of audience that really just loves and appreciates film. And in fact, my friend Jackson was with me. We met you very briefly at that screening, and Jackson was our guest 2 weeks ago. He's a filmmaker, and he was more nervous to meet you. He even said to me, he's like, dude, like, screw Martin Scorsese. Like, I'm nervous to say hi to Eric because I love this movie so much. And I'm like, let's go say hi and take a picture and everything. And it was great. So, I mean,
and we're seeing part 1 there tomorrow night. I'm seeing it tomorrow night.
Yeah, tomorrow night, the first one.
So these things have legs. These movies have, outlive all of us.
Yeah.
I was going to say, for you, driving on the fandom, when was the first time it kind of clicked with you that you were like, oh, I'm going to get my face on a Fright Rag shirt?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, for myself, it was at the Egyptian. They presented a 30-year anniversary.
That's right. Yeah.
And I was asked to join a handful of the cast and go check it out. And my wife and I did. And that's when I realized that there was an incredible following. And again, I realized that the film, that something that I'd been holding on to for 30 years, that I thought the take on the film I was completely wrong. And it wasn't until I sat with that audience and got their take on it that I had a new appreciation for it, and the fans. And then, of course, afterwards, we hung out a little bit, and that's when I realized how intense the fans are for this for the film and for these films. Again, I'm kind of embarrassed by it. Look, I could be out front of my house doing something and nobody cares. You know what I mean? Nobody cares. But then I show up there, and it's all of a sudden my wife said, "Oh my gosh, you're gonna be hard to deal with." No, love
Had she
everybody.
seen it before that?
She had.
She had. Okay.
Yeah,
I was
she
gonna
had.
Say, that would have been a fun date night.
Right. Oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, no, she had, and to tell you the truth, we saw it, she and I, back when we the first screening of the film.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so 30 years back.
Yeah, wow.
And of course, then it got pulled, so it's not like we went to the theater and watched it again. We hadn't watched it for 30 years. And we went back to the Egyptian and watched it, and here we are.
It's like time travel for you physically, like just seeing yourself
no,
on the screen.
It was great. It was great.
Wow.
So what have your kids thought of it? Like that dad has suddenly emerged as this like film icon.
Right. Well, my boys are a little bit older, and they've kind of seen it coming along because they paid attention to the internet, and I didn't pay any attention. So they were watching it come along, and they said, "Yeah, you didn't know that?" And I said, "Well, not really." And yeah, they said, "No, a lot of people have been talking about it, Dad." And I have a young daughter as well. I hope that she hasn't seen it unless she snuck off and saw it with her friends like you guys did.
Yeah.
But my boys have seen it, and their reaction is just they kind of shake their heads. I was talking to Rob earlier, and I kind of messed them up, because I spoke to the kids at an early age about film and TV from a very technical standpoint. So I kind of ruined, when the real, just what we go to the theater for. They're seeing like a 2-shot and a master shot. So I kind of did that so that when they did see the film, that they would realize that this is all just, it's make-believe,
Smoke and mirrors.
Smoke and mirrors, and we're just doing our best to...
They act like they're just shaking their head to you, but behind your back, I bet you they've told some of their friends how cool Dad is. Yeah. That's the great thing about having kids. You're never cool like in person to them.
Yeah.
Right. True.
But they're totally dropping the Silent Night, Deadly Night connection behind. Completely.
I mean, if you guys are both comfortable, can you tell me a little bit about your life post Silent Night, Deadly Night? Because there's obviously a gap between these anniversaries and stuff, and you left the business and started a new business.
Yeah, I stepped out of the business, and I had children, and then it got real. It got real. It got real fast.
They can attest to that.
Yeah. Thank you. So, I stepped into the trade show industry, which is, we build trade shows. I work for GES, fantastic company from the top to the bottom. And I've been there for just over almost 25 years in the industry. And so I kind of stepped out of Hollywood and went right into the trade show industry. And I'll be retiring shortly because I'm that old. And I'm looking forward to that because I studied later in the game with Sanford Meisner, the Meisner technique is a big buzzword in Hollywood, or it has been for quite a while. And I got to study with the master himself. And so in the beginning I didn't know anything about the process acting. I just was kind of a discovery kid. And so since then, I got to study with Sanford, and I feel like I really understand the art now. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting back to it. I'm looking forward to finishing up what I'm doing now and coming back to the industry. And thankful for David Dakota that he's brought me in on a few things to kind of wet my feet again. And so I'm just really excited to get back and to be able to share what I have to offer as an actor. To bring the writer's words to life, and that's something that I haven't had the opportunity to do for 25 years, and I got to study with a master, and so I'm really looking forward to getting back.
That's cool that desire is still there. What is it when you're on a set for you as an actor? I'm always curious with what is it that when you feel alive? What is the element of it? Is it the words? Is it the being in the moment, looking at another person and just doing, or is it the camera? What is it that you kind of miss?
I miss the moment. I miss the truth in the moment. So I'm always looking for that, and just to take my time and to really, establish that. And so, because that's what's being captured on the, when we're recording it. If I'm thinking about anything else but the truth in the moment, I'm off course.
That's all listening. Meisner's all listening.
He's all listening, and then you whatever, if you have some sort of a preparation coming into it, all that technical stuff. But so I'm always trying to accomplish the truth and bring as much to the writer's words that so how the writer intended it, to bring some reality to it, not just a word. You know, I want to be living it. Yeah. So
I'm curious.
Yeah.
You both of you gentlemen had left the industry. So for you, did you kind of keep track of where horror was going and how it was evolving? And now that you're kind of edging back into it with the Dave movies, you know, how much of it is the same and how much of it has changed in terms of horror then and now?
I mean, were you guys horror fans when you got into these films?
Yeah.
I was not a horror fan. Tell you the truth, I was, like I mentioned, I was kind of a discovery kid in Hollywood. I grew up playing sports. My father was a professional athlete. My brother was drafted by the Boston Red Sox. I've got a nephew now that pitches for the Detroit Tigers. Wow. We grew up playing ball, and that's what we did. So when I got asked to come to Hollywood, I was down in Palm Springs with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. And a gentleman came up to me after dinner and said, "I'm a manager in Hollywood, and I've watched you this evening interact with your girl and the waiter staff and how you paid your bill and whatnot. And I'm very interested in you as an actor." I said, "Well, my wife, my girlfriend, she's really pretty. You should talk to her." And he goes, "No. I mean, yeah, she's very pretty, but I could sell you." And so I went back to the room that night and flipped his business card up in the air and went, "What in the world was that?" And my girlfriend said, "What are you doing? You need to go see this guy." Right. And there we are. So I went and saw this guy, and the next thing you know, he's my manager, and I'm reading for this film.
Yeah.
And
that never happens. Like, people dream of that moment, and it never happens anymore.
I heard it happened to Charlize Theron. She was at a bank ATM. The guy just came up to her and said, "You should be in movies." That's the same kind of story. Yeah, like, you do hear, I mean, it's just crazy.
Honestly, if that happens here now, I just assume the guy's like a serial killer.
Yeah. You got to be careful with that.
Sure, you're a manager, sure.
Yeah. Well, Eric, we didn't hear from you in terms of, you know, because you had done a movie with Dave Dakota back then, around the time that Silent Night, Deadly Night, I think, right? A couple years after that. You were on an episode of Married with Children, I remember spotting you on. So you were working at the time. At what point did you, leave the business, and, you know, why?
Well, the David Dakota, you know, he's such a nice guy. He had seen SNDN2, Ed Grauman's Chinese, up on Hollywood Boulevard. It's another name now, but.
Oh, you mean when it actually came out? You got a release?
Yeah. When it came out, he saw it.
It played there? Yeah. That's amazing to mention that movie on that theater. Wow.
Yeah, and I got a call from a casting lady, and she said, "Well, there's a gentleman, a director in town here, David Dakota. He wants you for a film." And I started out as an extra, you know, before all of that, and so I was aware, you know, trying to get an agent, trying to get this, trying to get that. You find out the casting directors have hurt feelings real quickly if you go around them, or if the director calls them and says, "Hey, get me this kid. I want him." They want to vet this person. They want to make sure that this kid's got the chops for the role. So I knew that if I just accepted that job, you know, that easily, that I would burn a bridge, and because you will. And so I said to her, "That's great. I appreciate it. But I need to come in and read for this." And she said, "No, that's not. No, David wants you." And I said, "Well, no, because I need to read for this, because you may find someone better." And so that's the way that worked. He was taken aback by it, but then he understood where I was going with that, because small town, and and I knew enough to know I'll need her later. And so that was not the way I wanted to do. I don't want to be given anything. And so, just like, you know, how I got Robert went in and auditioned well and got it. I wanted to audition well and get it. Yeah. So, I lost your question, but I wasn't a horror fan then. And I hate saying this, but I'm not one of them. I'm not one now, only because, and I don't know. Ryan had a great question, because I don't know where the business has gone in the horror genre now, but then it was a lot of killing with no story, and I did not like that. I like story to propel the actions, and that's what I wasn't getting back in the day. And it didn't hold me, and I didn't want, you know, for me, if the story is good enough and drives it, man, you know, Mayhem City, that's great. Right. So, but as of late, no, I'm not really a horror fan. I could be. I just need to get into your world. This is your world. So
we'll give you some recommendations.
Yes, yes.
That's great.
Was it, Eric, was it a conscious decision at a certain point to not be acting for a while, or did things just change in life? Like, how did you make that decision? Especially if you're edging back towards it.
It's funny. We're both wanting to be in the business now, and he and Robert is. Look, I'll be brutally honest. I got an infection and it got in my kidneys and I was out of it. I was literally on my back for 10, 12 years. I was training like a madman. I was in great shape for a decade. I'm ready to go shape every day shape. Not like I look good once a year shape. And so, I was at a very vulnerable point, with my eating like a bird, training like a dog, like an idiot. I was an idiot bodybuilder. And I got an infection, and I was out of the business. Here's a guy that desperately wanted to do. Life interrupted when I was making plans, and that's what happened to me. It's negative. It's whatever. But it's the truth. I got sidelined, and so I became a clinical nutritionist in the early '90s to figure out my problem. Because I had money. I was very frugal with money I did make in the business, and was setting tile and doing labor work and everything you could imagine. I was doing it and spending all this money to get people to help me. But I have figured it out. It's just taken 25 years. So so that my story's a little bit different. I dropped off the face of the earth. Yeah. And I wish I didn't, because I want to be back in the gym. God, I want to be. And Robert and I have talked about the business in that era of the 80s and the early 90s, and I found myself not getting the work I wanted. I wanted dialogue work. I wanted real work. I wanted juicy pieces of work, but I would get to the second callback situation, and what would happen is I would be in the room with stars from that network. I auditioned for this a role on Friends for, forgot, Courtney Cox's boyfriend. Tom Selleck got that job. But the point is I would be in the room with these types of people in the second callback. And I'd go, well, I'm just the backup guy. I'm the guy that if Selleck can't make it for some reason and stubs his toe, then they'll call in the backup guy. Yeah. So I was the backup guy in the 90s. It was like, well, we need to call other people just to make sure that if the guy we really want can't make it, we'll go from this pool. And so it began to be a point where it was just tough to get work. I would ask casting directors when I would leave the audition, I'd say, well, how many submissions were there for this young athletic guy? And she goes, well, look at the photos and resumes as you leave. And it would be a stack, 2.5 foot high stacks, 500,000 resumes. So I ended up going on jobs, hi, I'm Joe Athlete. I'm here for the jockstrap fitting and that kind of stuff. And so it was like, wow. But it didn't deter me. I still was in the groups of people that they were all, and Robert knows this, that there was always somebody a little bit older that was just fed up with the business, that was leaving it, couldn't take it anymore because of and rejection I thrived on. And you have to be able to just, I'll say, well, I'm going to go in there, do my best and get, kicked in the teeth and walk out and know that I'm too tall, too short, too this, too that, and not dark enough, don't have blue eyes. So 99%, but if I got in the door, I would do well. It was just a matter of getting in the door. And so, that world ended for me. So that nobody really knows that story because it's so boring. It's like, oh God, who wants to hear that? But that's what happened. Everyone wanted to speculate. Well, he was just sick of the business. He was sick. No, something happened.
I got to tell you, of all the things you can do in this industry, I have tremendous sympathy for the actor because it's the hardest gig in the world. You're dealing with so much rejection on a daily basis.
You're not in control.
And you're not in
your
control.
Career to
like
an
you
extent.
said, maybe you're not tall enough or don't have blue eyes, or whatever. It's really just luck and timing for a lot of the cases.
I wouldn't say that was boring at all. I mean, like, people do need to hear that. You know,
I agree.
Especially fledgling actors. I remember the first part-time job I had. My coworker was someone who was a huge author in the 80s, and I was just like, "What happened?" And he gave me the lowdown. And so that happens, and people need to realize that there need to be fallback plans, and there sometimes need to be, life lessons to be had. Sometimes life gets in the way, and you need to address it. Kids, parenting, health stuff.
And
it
yet,
just
I mean,
happens.
the great thing about acting, the other side of that most people don't make it to because they have to stop and never get back into it. But I think, especially with you guys now, is the actor changes their look, and you're in a different pool now. Yeah. So you're in the hulky, the athletic jock character at one point. But at a certain point, I have friends now who are like 40. Already in this category. Now they're dad. They went from being like just 3 years before they were going for roles of like elite. Now they're dad character on a sitcom. And you guys, it's the same thing. You guys, if you go, especially coming back into it, I think that's really interesting because suddenly that's a whole different thing and probably a little less competitive in a certain way because you can be a little more idiosyncratic and look a certain way. Whereas, the idea of the jock character is a icon,
Right.
And I don't know. I think that for actors who stick it out, especially if they really love what they do, I think there's a whole new world to be discovered for that person. And I think that's cool.
There was, and God, this was a couple of years ago, but I think it was in the Los Angeles Times. It was one of our local papers that talked about how of the people who moved to Los Angeles to do acting, 30% will leave within the first 6 months having never acted in anything.
Sure.
But if you stick it out for 3 years, it was like 75% have been in stuff. It was like shocking numbers, and it was just all about duration and about staying there and the staying power of networking and getting to know people. But if you just show up and you're like, I'm going to be in movies, you're not going to get anything. No. It takes a while. So
yeah. And I mean, with horror, you guys are both icons in horror movies. So it's like, you done it, done. That's on your resume. But Eric, I wanted to talk to you obviously because you wrote, you sent me something before you came here that you wrote, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the writing. I mean, was writing always a part of even back when you were acting? Is that something that you kind of got into more recently, like the process of writing your own material? Because you wrote something that I guess I can say is kind of a continuation of where you guys both were in the Silent Night, Deadly Night movies. It's called Unhinged. And I think it's one of the most bonkers, like late 70s style, like Death Wish kind of exploitation movies. Not a Killer Santa movie, but it's some pretty crazy stuff. And I'm just curious how that happened. Like, where'd the writing part of it come out for you?
I had to remember that when I was in high school, I was assigned a job on a school paper. Mm-hmm. I showed up late to class, and the teacher was like, "Okay, Freeman, you're the editor." And I said, and I remember exactly, I said, "I'm not going to be pressured into anything." And he wrote that on the chalkboard. Freeman won't be pressured into anything. And it stayed there all semester. But the point is I got stuck editing other people's work and say reconfiguring it for them, or just say, hey, you need to structure this a little better. And syntax, I was run on census. It was all punctuation nonsense. I was a cleanup act. And but I didn't remember that I had done that in a prior life. And so the story of me driving my car back, it didn't have a radio, couldn't find it. You're in a car for 2,000 miles and old 65 Mustang, you're going to be thinking. And I just had read on the blogger, and Robert and I know the negative on things, and it just was sticking in my head, like, I'll show you. So so what I did is I dreamed up, and I had thought of this years earlier, that, hey, it would be nice if Caldwell came back. It'd be nice. He didn't die, and they did 3, 4, and 5, and all these things didn't matter to me because they were no good. People want Caldwell or equivalent, and they want him. And I said, well, what would happen to Caldwell 25 years later? And so when I did this thing with David Dakota and Robert, I had this script and I've polished it, and I think it's really good. And I wouldn't say that other than I'm exacting myself. And if it's not good enough for me, I wouldn't even mention it. So I saw Robert and I thought, oh, God, perfect. He's a star. People love him. I want him. And so I said, hey, would you be interested in looking at this? And I think he's looked at enough of it to say that, he likes it. And but that's how that came to be. I wrote it. I wrote it. I don't know, not for therapy, but rather what would happen. I want to know what I could do with this character all these years later, whether or not people would want to see me do this. Or no, that's another story. But I think they're having Robert on board and just get people, icons from the past, kind of together. And
so to clarify, this is something that you both would like to do together.
Absolutely,
this movie that Eric wrote.
Yes.
Yeah, it's designed. I wrote it to be low budget, naturally, only because there's no big effects, there's no explosion, there's no money shots, and I know those things just can tally up and make a big budget. So it's low budget, it's story driven, and people do die. And
a lot of people, by the way. Yeah. It's violent as hell.
Yes, exactly, as it should be. And that, Scott Schneid, who wrote the original of Robert's film, who did not like part 2 and hates it and will admit to it, had read it. He's the only one that did not like it. And he's going, well, it's violent. And I said, yeah. And because I didn't make any, he was in this, he has this idea of writing that was not mine. He was trying to coach me and say, well, you need a structure. This. And I said, well, I did it the way it would play out in real life. I want to write something that seemed real. I hate the idea of the things we've seen 1,000 times, or the stupid thing that someone does in order for something else to happen. It's always you have to do something stupid in order to propel the story. And I said, well, I don't want to do the stupid thing. I want to write it smartly that, things may transpire in the direction I went. So I like it. I love the fact that it's heinous, up close death. It's not guns. It's not. I stay in the horror genre.
Yeah.
Is it set on Christmas or not?
I don't want to give too much away, but tell us about at least the beginning, because it kind of picks up at a hospital with a Ricky character who 25 years ago was a Santa killer. But that's like such a minor part, because then where it gets thrust again, Death Wish is my best example, because I love that style of movie anyway. Yeah,
Death Wish meets The Fugitive.
Yeah,
kind of arrangement. Yeah, he's in a psychiatric hospital, and it's 25 years later. He's got a doctor. He is relatively normal, as we all are, and on the table, hopefully. And but through circumstance, didn't want him to spend too much time in this hospital. We all seen those. My God, I hate that, and those long-winded hospital stuff. So. It's a fast-paced movie that starts there, but through circumstances, he escapes from there. He has to. And then it becomes a quest to find out who set him up for a murder inside the hospital. And so, and then it goes from there, and people are on him. So it's a story that has a good beginning, middle, and end. And I don't want to give away anything other than it's there's a detective and his partner that are in it. That's a very large part, and I'm looking at Rob. I would love Robert to do the lead detective on this one, and
be awesome.
Be my pleasure. I look forward to it.
Yeah, because it's dialogue, and we love dialogue, and we love these juicy pieces of work,
right?
And I love that. So,
who also likes juicy pieces of work? Bill Moseley. Who's another fine actor who happened to also
was in here recently.
Be in Silent Night Part 3.
I don't know if you know, he's Ricky.
And he's a really great actor. I mean, not necessarily in Silent Night Part 3, but in general, great actor, great guy. And that would be fun to see all three of you.
We can put all the Silent Night people together.
He'd be good as like a psychotic.
But no, I mean, again, I'm glad. Well, first of all, I'm glad to have you both together on the show, and I knew that you were working on this thing, and I wanted to talk about it on the show because we have people that listen that
you never know.
You never know that might be interested in helping you guys see this through.
Did you guys ever see any of the others? Because the others the first two are tightly connected, obviously, because that's the whole point of him re-editing the first. But after that, it's one of the most bizarrely inconsistent series ever. The part 3 is nothing. Part 3 is kind of connected,
it's
but
there.
totally
Not
bizarre.
really.
Totally bizarre with the brain outside the body, and then 4 and 5 are totally unconnected.
Yeah, it's just a name only.
But did you guys ever watch them, or were you just not that committed? You're just not that committed to the franchise.
I was too busy.
Committed to trash.
I don't even think I've seen them all.
I finished last year. That was my pride. I watched number 5, which is actually very good. Number 5 really surprised me. It's Quentin Tarantino's AD on all his movies. Every single one of Tarantino's movies. His main AD directed the film. It's the only film he's directed. Yeah, the Toy Maker. And it has great effects. Really surprisingly, who's the old guy who plays that?
Mickey Rooney.
Mickey Rooney playing
who apparently lobbied against your movie.
Yes.
The original. He was
initially, yes.
Really? He was very vocal about how much he hated it. And then he ended up in Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Oh, America.
Wow.
Hollywood. Yeah, very much.
Monty Hellman directed.
Monty did number 3.
agree.
But that was as he was in a fever state, and his agent kind of tricked him into it. He said he did the best he could, but he said he came in on time and on budget, so it was the best film he ever made. That was his quote. The best film I ever made. It was on time and budget.
Him in the room.
He said he said he thought he was dying, and the guy kept pressuring.
Wow.
So I'm taking you haven't seen any past two.
No.
All right, we're gonna have a screening party right now. And there's a screening.
The lights. Here we go.
I just want to. So quick takeaway from rapid fire. Favorite moment from your respective films. One moment, one memory.
Mine was when I asked a little girl, and it's so sad that I'm referring back to a child in this film, but it was when I asked her, I was deranged, of course, if she had been naughty.
All right.
And in my right hand, I had the box knife, and she said no. And that was my favorite. Just because, just looking back at the film, I didn't do anything bad there.
Yeah. But also that scene could have gone real bad.
It could have gone really, really bad. So that's my favorite scene.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Eric?
Oh, I'm torn. I'm torn because I love the umbrella scene.
Yes.
One of the best kills ever, I think.
Yeah, that's
a good kill.
It is. I did like strangling Elizabeth Caton with the car antenna. That was juicy. I love that.
Yeah.
Of course, he was a little crazy. He was out there. My face was burning. I mean, I was out there on that one. So, but umbrella scene, and Frank, the guy I impaled, nicest guy in the world. Big, brutish, strong guy. I mean, he kept walking into me in that scene, earlier in that scene, and knocking me off my marks. I said, "Hey, you got settled down. You're just,
Stop being method.
I like watching you watch movies. Like some people have the Yule log at Christmas and they put it on the TV. I would just watch you watching the movie in the movie theater because I find that's like there's something hypnotic about the way, because I assume there's no movie there, right? You guys are just looking at a blank wall.
Yeah.
There's just something great about that. Because Garbage Day has become the iconic mantra on YouTube and stuff. What your memory of that in a script? Because I agree. I think actors get a bad rep. They're like, oh, that moment's crazy. But I think about reading that on the script, going, a guy pulls a gun and shoots someone with garbage and says Garbage Day. That's just crazy on a script level. Like, that is not your fault, but you deliver it in a way that then becomes remembered forever. But you remember reading that and thinking, what the hell is this part of the script?
Did you deliver it because you said that this one had shorter takes, but usually when you're on set, you'll deliver it 5 or 6 different ways, and then the director and editor get to choose which one. So is there a whole bunch of garbage days, method trying all these different methods on it?
Excellent question. Joe was on the set. Joe Earl was one. Okay, I remember that was the day we did the Rampage. We did the Mother Superior. Everything was that day, literally all the car stunt. But that was what Joe was always going, okay, now this guy's nuts. And now we're, when we did the head exploding in the car and the strangling and the Barney Fife getting shot in the head and all these good things. And then that. And so, right after the car stunt and I remember the sequence exactly, but no, I did it. I think I had a chance to do it. If I did it 2 or 3 times, only because there was a technical, problem, sound usually, and because that's a big deal. So I know I did it more than once, and I think it wasn't enough for them at that point. Okay, this is the culminate. He's at his peak, and so it's out there.
I think it's the laugh. In the script did it say to do the maniacal laugh after Garbage? Because I think that's where you get it. I think that's where you get us all on board. It's just that little laugh to himself. We could do a director's commentary of just that clip.
Already. I did a commentary with this whole movie because of how much I love it. No, that scene in particular is great. I mean, the way the score comes in, and I like it.
No, Lee did a great job in seaming the two together. I mean, it's almost, you can't really tell. He got that look, that flavor of Robert's film so well. Yeah. In the graininess. He a lot of things that you never would really think about. He nailed. He put it together so well.
Yeah, terrific editor. He did trailers for many, many years.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, first of all, again, it's such an honor to have you both here today, and we're so glad that you agreed to do this. We're going to talk holiday traditions and Christmas movies in general, but do you guys have traditions when it comes any particular movies or anything that you do around this time of year? Obviously not breaking out Silent Night, Deadly Night. That's what we do.
No. The typical, Miracle on 34th Street, It's a Wonderful Life, the traditional stuff. We make sure and at least watch one of those. Mm-hmm. But can I add to that
Sure.
when I go to these conventions, the folks that come up to me, they say, hey, I watch it every Christmas.
Yep.
And I'm like, wow, well, do you throw in a Miracle on 34th Street? Oh, no way, man, that stuff sucks. We love horror. We love horror. And it's just so amazing. The fans
Well,
are
also,
great.
you had a word Punish is you could say that any horror fan, and they
Any
know
horror
what
fan,
the
they
know
know
exactly
that
what
word.
it
Right.
came
like
from.
it's just
Right.
one word, and it's
Right.
it represents the entire idea of that film.
Yeah.
And Christmas, it's again, it's the inverse of Christmas.
Right.
What happens to the naughty list? It's cool.
Yeah. What about you, Eric? Do you have any holiday traditions?
Robert said it so well. I do like those old classic movies, not necessarily, Miracle on 34th Street or Jimmy Stewart, but rather just older films. I always appreciate the Burt Lancasters in the you name it, Kirk Douglas, etc., Claude Rains. I just like the watching the old stuff because there's so much there, especially black and white. But to answer your question, nothing out of the ordinary. I just enjoy good film, whatever it is. I don't, I'm not going to pick a genre and say, it has to be this. So, but Robert made a good point. When I was at the Beverly Cinema, there was the lady with a box of my work. They didn't know I was going to show up. But the point is, she said exactly the same thing. Every Christmas, we hang a Silent Night, Deadly Night wreath on the door, and we have eggnog. We have everyone over, and and she went on and on about this tradition. And I think that she speaks for many.
Yes.
It's a tradition for them to see these movies.
Right.
Now, I mean, you've come to a screening or two, but would you be open to checking out one of these conventions and doing that? Because I know a lot of people would love to meet you, and Robert's done a couple, and your experience has been pretty positive.
It's been fantastic. I've done this. I've done two. I'll be doing a third one, TerrorCon in Rhode Island this coming February. But Dominic Mancini, he represents me, and he's a fantastic guy and real careful, because he knows that I have a real job.
Yes, of course.
But and these things are great, and since the Egyptian, that night that I experienced at the Egyptian, I've opened myself up to this because the fans are fantastic, and to keep this film alive is just it's beyond my imagination. And so
you guys should come
it's
to
been
Texas
great.
Frightmare with us.
It's been
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. That would
And
be
the
fun.
fans would love to see Eric.
I think so.
They would love to see this guy, man.
Even if you did a one-off just once, I think people would be so pumped to come and meet you.
I was just thank you. You're very kind, all of you. I appreciate coming in, especially on this not a normal day for you. So I wanted to say thank you for that.
Of course.
Yeah.
But if Robert were there, I would feel better. I'm shy. I don't know what to say. My performance was, he can absolutely say, man, you can solidly say Robert did a great job on this. There's you can't say anything. For me, you can cut me to pieces, and not that I would fall apart on that, but I've always lived with the thought of I did 67 things before I disappeared. Can you pick something else that might be good? And don't get me wrong, it's so good it's bad what I did. And so I'm living with that. That's fine. But
Well, we have a theory of no guilty pleasures here.
There's no guilty
Yeah,
pleasure.
no guilty
I don't believe in
pleasures.
so
They
bad
don't
it's
exist.
good.
Yeah.
Not so bad it's good. It's so good it's awesome.
Well, because you can't get 6 million hits accidentally. I mean, unless it's like a little baby chain smoking or something like that. That is just who can explain it. Or Gangnam Style, whatever. But there's something people are watching because there's that's something genuinely funny, but that's part of the performance. It doesn't feel accidental. If they asked you to give a big performance, then you delivered what they asked, and that is what people are responding to. It's not a mistake on you. And I think I think by coming out to the fans, actually being in, you'll quickly find that out in person. What he does, I can imagine it being quite an unburdening, because you'll realize that the love is genuine and it's not mockery. And I bet and I can understand totally why you might feel otherwise deep down, even because you've done something so long ago. But it really, I know from talking to people, and we have an actor friend of ours who was on a show a couple of years ago with us, AJ Bowen, who, he's called it like one of his favorite performances. And that might sound crazy to you because you did it, but to somebody that's real.
As an actor,
and I think that's really important to remember with
I
art.
understand that he is completely committed to what they told him to do there. And he's like, I will fight fuckers that say otherwise.
Yeah. So. And that's what your job was, right? So unless it was completely accidental and you're doing the opposite and they wanted it grounded and you're doing this, that's different. But if you're giving them what they asked for, then you did the job. And I know, I think you deserve credit for that. And the fact that we're all still being entertained by both these movies says a lot,
Well, thank you.
Longevity. So
yeah, there we go. So
I think
we'll
Eric
try to convince you to come to one.
I think he'd
be. If we're there with you and we'll all hang out together.
Let's put this out to our Shockwaves listeners.
Yeah.
Go on Facebook. Go on our page. Let us know.
Yeah,
where
what would you
Let us know if you'd like to see him out there.
And also, and before we move on to other things, like how do you want to interact with people who call themselves fans or interested in your work? Like, how are they best to follow what you guys are doing or to contact you? Is it through social media? What do you guys do?
Yeah, Facebook page.
Well, I would say for myself at this point, I would go through full Empire Promotions, which is Dominic Mancini, and anything that's said there, it'll get right in my hands.
Okay.
And,
do you have like a Facebook fan page or anything like that?
I don't.
Okay.
I'm working on that.
Okay.
But not at this point.
Cool. Well, we'll let them know when it happens.
Fantastic.
What about you, Eric?
Oh, hey. There's probably no way to contact me.
Wait, you're still hermetic after all this?
Through us.
Yeah, through you guys. Clearly.
Do you have a fax machine? Because we can make this happen.
I'll get some thermal paper and put it.
Signed. That's how you do your signed thermal papers.
But no, I apologize for not being up to date, and
I don't apologize.
Actually, it's to be commended.
But if somebody,
we could help. We could help.
If there's somebody out there who really loves the work,
something.
if we can, if they give it to us, we'll find a way to get it to you, just so you guys,
Very good.
And we'll convince you one day to come to Texas with us.
Yeah.
A convention.
We go to Dallas, Texas for Texas Frightmare almost every year, and we just have such a great time.
It's one of the best.
And
times.
they're also
It's amazing.
positive.
Yeah.
That's sometime in the summer, I think, right?
It's
April?
May.
Oh, yeah.
Is it May? Okay, it's coming up in May.
But it's always hot down there.
So before we wrap up, quick fire, Christmas movies that you're going to watch.
I always watch Scrooged, which isn't technically a horror film,
No,
but
it's,
it's scared.
right.
That
It's got
ending
scary
scene,
stuff in it.
Scrooge is like Tales from the Crypt Presents.
Yeah.
exactly.
Love Scrooge.
Like it
my
scared the
favorite.
crap out of me when I was a kid. That end scene with the death and everything. But yeah, that's the one like we always watch. And Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas, also not a horror film, but
Amazing.
Love it.
it's you got to
Still.
watch it.
You're hitting our sweet spots.
Yeah.
So it's okay. Elric?
Yeah, I love Scrooge too. I think it's one of my favorite movies. I watched Saint last night. Saint, the one you're talking about. I hadn't seen that, the Dick Maas film, and I thought the production value was great, and it's a big movie. Some of the storytelling at times, stories suddenly go away for a while. Certain characters disappear, so it's heavily flawed. But I thought it was fun, and I didn't realize it was set on December 5th, which is a different day than Christmas. So I thought it was a Christmas movie, but actually it's a Saint Nick Day in Amsterdam. So it's actually December 5th. But my go-to, besides the obvious, they're both these gentlemen. So my all-time favorite's always been Christmas Evil since the first time I saw it.
It's a great
Christmas, and mostly because it's just a slow burn character study, and it's quite sad, but then it has one of the best endings I've ever seen in any movie, like such a surprising way. And the guy, if you ever get a chance to talk to Lewis, who was like my first show that I did when I moved to town, got him on the show, is he really set out to make, he set out to make like a high-end art film. And he saw Last Year at Marienbad, one of the artiest films in the history of cinema, and he saw the movie and flew to France and found the cinematographer and brought him back to shoot Christmas Evil. And people don't know these, and they say he had the whole film storyboarded out like he thought it was Citizen Kane. His plan was to make a great, great movie, and I think he did, but I don't think anyone, like the time you guys were working, no one wanted that. They wanted exploitation. They wanted to.
It's called You Better Watch Out.
Yeah, it's called You Better Watch
It was
Out.
changed to Christmas Evil to sell it.
Yeah, and he had a lot of problems with the mafia. The money came from the mob, and the film basically kind of disappeared at a certain point. And it wasn't until 20 years later, John Waters said it's his favorite movie of all time. Not even Christmas movie, just favorite movie.
Yeah,
and
he
suddenly
does a commentary on it.
Yeah, suddenly people took notice when somebody else and got a re-release, and but it's the hard part, and same with talking with you guys is same with this director is because of the timing. He doesn't have a filmmaking career, He could have, I think, on the quality of that film, had that film been what they wanted, he would have made another film and another film. He had that kind of ability, but instead you just have this one piece that's now in the past. And I think that film, it's for those, it's the fact everyone, Fiona Apple's dad's the lead, Brandon Maggart, gives a
Set in a
really
toy
great
shop,
performance.
right?
Well, it starts in a toy factory. Yeah, he works
Okay.
there, but it's just a fantastic, because it's a mixture of horror and a Christmas movie. I don't think it's a straight horror film at times. I feel like it's also like a Christmas movie. Sometimes I think there's a bit of a difference than just exploiting Christmas. You know?
Is there a scene with because I haven't seen this in years, but I'm placing
start?
a scene with a wind-up Santa in a gutter.
Well,
And
there are
the camera
toys.
holds on it, holds on it for a really long stretch.
There probably is. I haven't watched it again this year. I got to watch it again.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank on that because I did just recently rewatch it.
But like all good things, it starts with the taboo of like, Santa making out with mommy and how that affects the kid.
Okay, now I remember it.
But it's good stuff. But and also I'm going to watch Black Christmas tomorrow as part of the 3.
yeah.
I haven't seen that in 15 years. So
Oh my
I'm excited
god,
to see it again.
that's probably the best of all of them for that. What about you, Ryan?
Black Christmas, Silent Night, Deadly Night. I just watched Krampus earlier
is
this
great.
month.
Yeah.
But the one I usually go to is March of the Wooden Soldiers, which is this weird black and white Laurel and Hardy movie. Have you guys ever seen this?
No, never.
It is batshit crazy. Huge production value, but because of its age, it aged well, but there's a kind of a weird warped sensibility to it. A lot of characters in costume. You've got like kind of Cat in the Fiddle. So you've got basically, it's kind of set in a, Babes in Toyland kind of fantastical environment. So you've got a guy in a cat suit. And you've got a guy in a mouse suit, or I should say a little person in a mouse suit. And the hilarity that ensues when the cat and the mouse meet. And then you've got Laurel and Hardy kind of mixed up with this princess who's being lusted after by some old dude, and it's batshit crazy. And it would always popped up on right after Miracle on 34th Street on WPIX channel 11, and my parents just left me with it, and I love it. I love it so much. And I remember my dad and I just were sitting there watching and laughing our asses off.
You mentioned Babes in Toyland, which had always been one of my favorite horror film or Christmas films that I watched every year. It's not a horror film, but a couple of weeks ago they were doing a theatrical screening of it. It was through Cinefamily, but they had it at the Puppet Theater that they host some things at, the Bob whatever it's called, Puppet Theater.
Oh yeah.
So I took Marnie to go see it, and she liked the beginning, but then she kept going, Mom, I don't get it. Mom, I don't get it. And I was like, okay, this one does not hold up. And there were parts where I was like, I don't know where that character came from. Like I was seeing plot holes I hadn't seen when I was a kid. So
Poking holes and Babes in Toyland.
Babes in Toyland, not holding up.
But yeah, and then last night I watched Gremlins while I was wrapping presents. And
that's
Gremlins pulls on the heartstrings, man. I started
timeless.
I started choking up when he was like, "Bye, Billy." I was like, "Oh, Jesus." But talk about a movie that is a Spielbergian, family package. And it's just like a piece of sour candy. It tastes so good, but then you're like, oh, this is really nasty.
That's the one that
nasty.
Parents were tricked into bringing their kids, and then gremlins are like blowing up in microwaves, and they're like, oh shit, this is a little too much.
Well, and a protagonist's father dies on Christmas and reveals there's no Santa. I mean, that's a brutal moment if you watch that as a kid.
Like before emo and before goth and all that stuff. Like that character could have just steered into like full on black nail polish, black hair. She just went full goth later on.
Wow.
I love it though.
Well, I love all those as well, but I'd like to remind our audience that the Dolph Lundgren movie "I Come in Peace" is technically a Christmas movie because it takes place in December.
No, I did not remember that.
And it's Scanners 3: The Takeover, the greatest of the Scanner sequels, opens on a Christmas party. So you're welcome.
As Rabid does too.
There you go. So that's a Christmas movie.
Rabid, Scanners 3, and I Come in Peace. There's your Christmas Eve right there. I mean,
no other show
after you double both Silent Night
1 and 2
for
sure.
I love that movie. I Come in Peace.
Do you really? I love it.
There was a guy, Matthias Hughes. I used to work out with him in Goals in Venice.
Oh,
yeah,
shit,
the guy was a brute.
He was
beautiful.
He's like 7 feet tall. The villain guy, right? Yeah.
All right, no. You're talking my language. So who else did you work out with back in the 80s? The Venice Gold's Gym days. I mean, like that was like the heyday of like the bodybuilders.
Oh yeah, it was, and the steroids for breakfast. These guys are monsters. Yeah. Oh God. they were all there, but I remember one day when the Ultimate Warrior, the wrestler, was that gym would clear out. They'd give him the whole section of the gym for him. The guy was, I mean, he was scarier without his makeup on. This guy was a monster.
That's crazy.
But Hulk Hogan and all the bodybuilding names you can imagine were there.
Yeah.
And
that was one of my first stops when I first moved here. I had to go.
That's amazing.
My dad
we
was a
went
bodybuilder when I was growing up, and he was like, "If you're moving to Los Angeles, you got to go." And I was like, "Okay, all right."
yeah.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. Thank you guys so
Thank
much.
you guys so much.
To our audience, Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry
Happy holidays,
Hanukkah,
everybody.
Happy
Happy holidays.
And we'll see you. Actually, no, we'll have our best of episode up on Monday, the 26th.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.